well, what do you mean? It's like, well, you know, two dark-skinned people shouldn't be going out, you know. And it's like, you know, as a kid, it's kind of like, well, you know, why? You know,
Right.
It's kind of hard to understand that people are thinking like that, but that's what people think. You know, they think like, you know, if you're two dark-skinned people, then maybe you shouldn't get together because the kid will come out dark-skinned. So it's better to like try and mix it up
And be ridiculed,
you know, I don't know
like
what,
you.
yeah, exactly,
Right,
exactly, right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard them all. I've been Choco Bliss,
Yeah.
Choco, Blackie, African booty scratcher, no pun
Yeah,
intended.
yeah.
And so I've heard them all growing up. So it does you know what? It did bother me though. It bothered me,
Right.
and I don't think I really cope with how much it affected me when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm gonna share y'all, I'm gonna share this with, this is between us though. when I was about 15 years old, I bought a little tube of bleaching cream, and I used to put it on my face every night. You know, a part of my little nightly ritual, I rub it in, lay down, I'd have my stocking little wave cap on
Right.
tight, you know, and I'd be laying there. And then it dawned on me one day, if this stuff works, you'll have a light face, and everything else, you'll have black ears, black
Right.
neck. I'll look like a complete fool because I only put it on my face.
Right.
You know, and I prayed. I was like, okay, God, please don't let this stuff work.
Right.
Please don't let it work, and I'll never do anything like this ever again. You know, but it just goes to show to the extent of how stuff like that does
Right.
affect you. Mari, you said something interesting. We had this conversation once before, and I asked you rather, if you had a choice between
Right.
two women
Right.
who were equally attractive, one
Right.
dark, one light.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't trying to front you all, but you said
Right.
you would probably gravitate toward the lighter one.
Right.
Why?
Well, first of all, I consciously wouldn't do that, you know. Thanks for putting me on the spot, but I consciously wouldn't do that. But I think the thing that, you know, I have to keep in mind, and I think we all have to keep in mind, is like, at the end of the day, we can't blame the media, you
That's
know.
true.
We can't blame, you know, the past, as in like the Willie Lynch speech that you touched on. You know, we can't blame anyone else. We just have to look inside and say, like, what's the right thing for us to do, you know. And I think as soon as you're comfortable with yourself, you know, because even as far as like two women who are equally good looking, you know, the bottom line is I'm going to pick the one with the better personality if
Right.
they're equally good looking.
Right.
Unfortunately, brothers aren't honest. They're not
Right.
honest with themselves,
Right.
and they're not
Even
honest
if
with
they
everyone
did.
else around them.
Right.
You know, so how can you look to some? I would love to read a book by a brother who's going to open
Right.
up and be completely honest about his faults. You know,
We're
and
gonna talk about that in a minute.
but you don't find that too often. You know, I have male friends in my life, and you know, I kind of cling to them because I can have candid, honest conversations with them. But the average brother, you can't. You know, because they're either trying to get over,
They got
or you
something
know,
to
they have
hide.
something to hide. Exactly.
But you know, I know one thing, because I seen an article once. It said 101 ways to please a black man or something, or a book or something. It ain't no 101 ways to please no man. It's about 4 things on that list.
And what's
That-
that?
Well,
things that
that's
you
another. This a
think?
family show, but but that it's not 101 nothing. It's let me watch the game. It's a sister that can cook, that's clean. You know.
But it's a
Okay,
lot of
but-
sisters that do that.
Right.
And they know that. We've been taught that. Cook, clean, you know, take care of the children, you know, be attentive and all that. But,
And that don't work.
and it doesn't work.
And it
I
goes
mean,
back to the taking advantage
Taking
of things.
advantage,
And
because-
people think because you do that, that, you know, you just putting yourself out there to be taken advantage of, and then sisters clam up and we don't want to do nothing for a brother because when we do stuff, y'all take advantage of it, and it's looked at negatively when you, like she said, when you love someone, you feel like you should do things for them or you want to do things for them. But if you feel people taking advantage of you, you're not going to do it, you know.
So let's ask a brother, Kenjuan, why do men tend to use women?
Why they tend to use women?
Use women,
Because,
yes. Take advantage of situations.
Because women allow themselves to be used.
Really?
but that's not an excuse.
Well, I mean, I didn't say it was right. She asked me why. As a Latin hip hop artist, has it been harder for you to be taken seriously in what is considered by many to be a black musical genre?
Well, you know, I mean, if you go back into the history of hip hop, you'll know, you know, that when you're talking about prior to like freestyling and MCing, you got the DJs, you got the B-boys, then you got the MCs, and you got the writers, okay? These elements of hip hop. Within those elements, you know, you got blacks and Latinos. You know, there's even whites sprinkled into that. We can't deny that.
That's true.
With that being said, you know, you see at the time the Latinos are excelling in, you know, the b-boying and the writing, not so much being lyricists, okay? But in Chicago, and I speak for myself, if you're able to embrace that, you know, and if you're able to appreciate another artist, because, you know, we're known as people who are haters and this and that, but I really don't get that vibe. I've really gotten very, very welcoming, open arms from all the people who have listened to me perform.
Rob Walker, the death penalty, pro or con?
That's a good question. Here's what it would take for me to be in favor of the death penalty.
Okay.
You would need to have much more equitable application of the death penalty. You would need to have much more equitable enforcement of the death penalty. Let's put it this way. We probably can't even count how many black men have been killed based on the accusation of having killed a white person. How many white folks do you think have been executed on the accusation of having killed black people? Do we even need to get into what kind of disparity that is? Do we even need to get into the fact that unless you are exceptionally famous with an exceptional amount of money, if you're black and you're charged with a capital crime, you have a far higher likelihood of actually to actually die for it than if you're white and charged with a capital crime.
Absolutely.
It would be a whole lot easier for me to support the idea if the system were run more equitably. But since it is not, since the ABA, the American Bar Association, has actually come out recently and asked that executions be suspended in the United States due to the extreme inequality of it, there's no way I can support it.
I agree. I agree. I think that, you know, Illinois has had a moratorium on the death penalty for several years now. And that's the very reason why.
It's not that I'm saying that there are people who don't deserve to die. There are some very, very heinous crimes where in some situations the world is a much better place without these individuals. However, we're going to differ on that. But at the same time, since the system is so inherently flawed and broken the way it is enforced right now, I can't jump on it and say I'm pro-death penalty.
Okay.
We should not be making excuses for certain types of behavior. And again, the young people that I come in contact with, the juvenile justice, most of those kids know right from wrong. They know right from wrong. So, but they have been inundated with what you have suggested in terms of the media, because I think many of these young men, especially young black boys, are criminalized very early. We got all these types of lexicons, social lexicons. We call them endangered species. We call them at risk. They don't see much of a future for themselves, and we reinforce this with this type of language. And what I'm suggesting, we need to do away with some of this language. We need to stop calling out kids at risk. In this country, to me, all black people are at risk. It's not just these kids. And so they identify with these lexicons and, you know, the whole concept of negative identification. If you call someone a negative name long enough, I mean, then eventually that person will associate with that name and begin to act out that behavior.
We spent almost a half hour talking about the problems. Let's quickly touch on some solutions. How does Jobs for Youth handle individuals who may have had a checkered past but are looking to turn their lives around?